I mean, I guess if y'all want to leave, you can, but I'm going to preach. So we'll do what we're going to do. All right, we're going to wrap up our series this week called Wise Up. I hope you've enjoyed it, although I hate using the word enjoy because we're not here really to just enjoy. We're here to soak in the Word of God. And we just got through singing the words, I open up my heart to you, right? Now, my prayer is that as we sing those words, we actually mean what we're singing. And the way we now open up our hearts to the Lord in this time of the service is to open His Word and take in His Word with open hearts and open minds so that His Word transforms us, right? And that's what we've been trying to do here in this series called Wise Up. The theme verse for the series comes from the book of Ephesians. In chapter 5, verse 15, Paul says, be careful how you live then, right? Not as unwise, but as wise. And so that's the whole goal of this series is we're trying to get practical wisdom for our day-to-day lives. And we've talked about wisdom and foolishness. We've talked about friends. We've talked about alcohol. We've talked about our words. We've talked about money. And then last week, we talked on Valentine's Day about sex. And all the men were like, yes, I want to go home and be doers of the word, right? So we talked about sex and the dangers of sexual sin and what God-glorifying sex looks like, all from the book of Proverbs. This week, we're going to talk about work. So if you've got your Bible, get it open to Proverbs, and we're going to be in go to Proverbs chapter 26 and mark it, and then turn to Proverbs chapter 6. So mark chapter 26, and we'll get there later, and then you can go to Proverbs chapter 6. Now, I tend to think that work's fallen on hard times today, especially in our nation. Our nation was built on hard work, but it seems like the value of work is actually diminishing now. And there's purpose, there's fulfillment, there's satisfaction, there's value found in work, but we here in our country are becoming increasingly lazy as a society. Matter of fact, the Department of Health and Human Services gives these stats. 80% of Americans don't meet the daily requirements for physical activity. Okay? Now, this is just laziness in general. 8 out of 10 of us in this room today don't meet the daily requirements for physical activity. Children spend more than 7.5 hours a day in front of a screen. And now with virtual learning, I'd have to say that number's got to be higher. Nearly 1/3 of high school students play video games or computer games for 3+ hours on an average day. Health's on the decline because we're less and less active, right? So while our health is on the decline, obesity is on the rise. And so I thought this week, I wish I could find some pictures of some lazy people. And don't worry, it's none of you all are going to make the screen this morning. But do you think I found some pictures of lazy people on the internet? Oh yeah. Do you think I'm going to show them to you? Oh yeah. All right, let's look. So this is a dude mowing his yard in a golf cart pushing the push mower. All right. I don't know if that's lazy or ingenious, but we'll go with lazy. Here's a second picture. So if you're like, what's the deal with this? I just thought it was funny because I was like, Lord forbid you have to walk down 4 steps in the mall, get on the escalator. Here's the next picture. This looks like something we do here. That's why I showed this picture. It feels like something you'd see at Harvest Point. It's like, daylight saving time's ended. Don't take the clock down, change it. Just put a sign under it that says -1 hour. That's laziness. In my notes, I titled this one Burger Queen. And you see, it's just hard work standing in line for a Whopper. And the last picture here I thought was great. Now, this is a dad with a rope tied to the swing, 20 yards out in the yard, and he's just swinging his kid with his feet up, right? So, yeah, again, I don't know if this is all laziness or genius, but we're going to stick with laziness for right now. So, when we talk about work today and the idea of laziness, I think that convenience and technology really are kind of leading us to be lazy, okay? I mean, think about it. How many brick and mortar stores are closing down because people just shop online now, right? I don't want to have to get dressed. I don't want to take a shower and get dressed and get in the car and go to the store. I can just walk into the living room and get on Amazon, and they'll bring it to my doorstep in 2 days, right? It's kind of bled into our grocery shopping now. I mean, who has the time and effort to actually go and walk around Food City? I mean, now I can just order it with a few press of a few buttons here, and then they'll even load it in my car when I get there. I just got to let them know that I'm there. What about fast food? Many people don't even cook anymore because it's more convenient to just run through somewhere and get something that's cooked for you. Or the Lord forbid you have to get in your car. Now we have services like Grubhub and DoorDash. They'll go get your fast food for you and bring it to you. And I've got a Comcast cable, and now on my remote control, I can hold a button down and just say what I want to watch. Who wants to push 4 or 5 buttons, right? When I can just hold the button and say ESPN. We have vacuum cleaners now. People used to actually take brooms and sweep their tile or hardwood floor. They actually used to take vacuum cleaners and vacuum the carpet. Now we have these little Roomba vacuum cleaners that'll just do it while you're gone. Because, I mean, you don't want to have to get up and sweep. So we'll just let this, and the little vacuum goes to its home, right? I mean, it's smarter than a lot of us. And Siri on your phone and Google. Half of us aren't going to know how to spell anything in 20 years because we never write anything. We just say everything into our devices. I mean, what about church? You don't even have to get up on Sunday mornings now to come to church. You can just watch online. You can just lay in bed and watch church and do church, right? It's all about convenience. It's all about technology. Now, that's kind of in general. I want you to understand today when we talk about laziness, we're going to look at it in the context of your work, your occupation. So whether you're an electrician or a stay-at-home mom or a construction worker, whatever your line of work is, that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's all about the context of your occupation today, okay? So now we have some people that won't work in our country, right? They just won't work. I mean, it's easier to just draw a check from the government and just stay at home in my pajamas. And now we actually have these crowdfunding websites like GoFundMe, and they allow people to just ask for money because I don't want to have to get a job. And I know there's some noble causes there. I know there's some medical expenses and people start GoFundMe pages for other people. But some people just don't want to work and they're just... And they don't even want to go to the interstate ramps now and stand and panhandle. They'll just create a GoFundMe account and say, hey, I need money. Some people won't work because working's not for them, they say. Some people will work, but they don't want to work. They're just working so they can get what they want. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm going to share one of my pet peeves with you. Have you ever went to like a restaurant and sat down and like been eating and like your server come by and you be like, hey, can I get another Coke? And they look at you like, what am I, your server? And it's like, yes, actually you are. Actually, yes, I'm sorry to inconvenience you, but this is actually the job you signed up for. That's what I want to say to them. But some people work, but they don't want to work. Other people won't work. But stats tell us that most of the time, even when people work, they tend to be lazy. So I was looking this week, and Human Resources Did you know this? Human resources assumes that employees waste 1 hour a day in an 8-hour workday. HR assumes 1 hour. They suspect that employees waste an hour and a half a day, but average employee wastes 3 hours a day. 3 hours out of an 8-hour workday are wasted by employees. 77% of workers admit to logging on to Facebook while on the clock. This stat right here just blew my mind. 16% of people from the ages of 25 to 65 said that they would consider quitting their job if Facebook was banned. And 18 to 24-year-olds, 39% of them said, yeah, I'm quitting for sure if I can't look at Facebook while I'm on the clock. 65% of YouTube views happen between 9 and 5. That's average work time. More than 1/2 of employed Americans admit to shopping online while they're on the clock. I'm not really doing anything right now. I need to order something for the house. 96.6% of fantasy footballers manage their team during work hours. On average, someone who owns a fantasy football team in a league spends 2.5 hours a week while they're at work managing their fantasy football team. Speaking of fantasy football costs employers $9 billion annually in lost productivity. Not to be outdone by March Madness, the college basketball tournament that happens in March and April. March Madness costs employers $13 billion annually in lost productivity. People filling out brackets, people online researching, people watching the games, $13 billion annually. We have strikes, we have holdouts going on. People want more money for less work. Now our jobs are all about our demands. Well, I need longer breaks. I need insurance. I need retirement. I've got 10 hours of PTO. I need 20 hours. I've got 2 weeks vacation. I need 3 weeks vacation. And we're always wanting more and more and more and more benefits from our employers. This country was built on hard work, but it's increasingly being occupied by lazy citizens. Now, this is not a new problem. Matter of fact, about 3,000 years ago, the wisest man ever wrote down his wisdom. And did you know that a lot of what he wrote down was about work and laziness? And so what we're going to do is look at what he said about work this morning in Proverbs. Now remember, this is not going to be a full-scale study on the concept of work, okay? I believe God has made each person here and given each one of us specific abilities and talents with your mind, with your hand, to do a specific job or occupation. We're not going to get into that today. Some of y'all are like, well, let's talk about workaholics, one sermon at a time, okay? We're not going to talk about workaholics today. Should you work too much? Absolutely not. But that's not what today is about. There's much more to be said about work, but today, in the context of Proverbs and wisdom, we're going to look at your work and how you work, being willing to work and working hard, okay? So Proverbs chapter 6, but before we get there, let me start with this. Let's start with the theology of work, okay? And matter of fact, before we start with that, let's start with prayer. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for Solomon and the wisdom that you have given him, Lord. Now, we do open our hearts to you. And we ask that as we study about work and wisdom for work, Lord, that you would speak to our hearts, you would convict us, you would encourage us, and you would change us. And we want to be more like Jesus. So we pray it in his name. Amen. All right, let's start with the theology of work. Genesis 1:28, back in the creation account, speaking of Adam and Eve, says that God blessed them, and what did he tell Adam and Eve to do? Be fruitful and increase in number, right? Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. He gave them a task. Fill the earth, subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. God gave Adam and Eve a task. He gave them a job, so just write this down. God created you to work. Work. To exert energy and activity in order to achieve a purpose or a result. You got that? To exert energy or activity in order to achieve a purpose or result. It's about accomplishing tasks. He gave Adam and Eve a specific task. It was to subdue the earth and rule over the animals. We're created to work. Now in Genesis 1:31, what we see is kind of a summation of creation. And God said that he kind of gave one adjective to his creation. He saw all he made and he said it was very what? Does that include work? Yeah, right. You're created to work, and jot this down. Work's good. Work is good. His summary word for creation, including work, was it's very good. Now, in Genesis chapter 3, we know that Adam and Eve rebelled against God and sin entered the world, and God pronounced a judgment on work. We can read about that in verses 17 through 19 in Genesis chapter 3 when God goes to give his judgment. He says to Adam, "Because you listened to your wife and ate the fruit from the tree which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you." Here it is, through painful toil. Toil is hard work. Sweat producing, maximum energy. Through painful toil, you will eat from it all the days of your life. It'll produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. So when sin entered the world, part of the curse on man and on women, on humankind, was that work became hard. Jot this down. Work is hard, but it's still good. God said it would be hard. He didn't say that it wouldn't be good. Further scripture in the New Testament shows us that work is good. Paul said in Ephesians 4:28, he says, some of you guys have been stealing. You need to quit stealing and work. Steal no longer, but you must work doing something useful with your own hands so that you may have something to share. Paul told the people in Ephesus to work. It was such a big deal to work that in Thessalonica, the people thought Jesus were coming back like immediately. And they're like, they quit their jobs, right? They quit their jobs and they're like, we're just waiting on Jesus. We're not going to do anything, just wait on Jesus. And Paul gave this interesting rule in 2 Thessalonians 3:10. He says, remember this rule I gave you. One who's unwilling to work shall not eat. You don't work, you don't eat. Boy, we've come a long way from that in our nation, haven't we? See, work is good. Work was part of God's original design. It's hard, but it's good. That's a theology of work. We're created to work, it's good. It's hard, but it's good. So now, let's get to Proverbs chapter 6, and let's look at 5 characteristics of laziness. Then we're going to look at 4 consequences of laziness. Then we're going to look at 3 truths for the Christian worker. Laziness. We're going to talk about that in Proverbs chapter 6. We're going to start in verse 6. Now, let me just give you a definition of laziness real quick, okay? Laziness is the quality of being unwilling, that's a key word, the quality of being unwilling to work or use energy despite having the ability to do so. You can work, but you choose not to work. That's laziness. That's the biblical definition for laziness. Here's the first characteristic of laziness. Jot this down from Proverbs 6:6. Laziness is foolishness. Solomon says, go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. Sluggard is an interesting Hebrew word. Asael is the Hebrew word. And it's used 14 times in Proverbs, and it's not used anywhere else in the Old Testament. Asael, it means sluggard or one who moves like a slug. It's a euphemism for a lazy, irresponsible person. Think slothful, okay? Now, what do y'all know about a sloth? Yep, it's actually the slowest animal in South America. Did you know a sloth sleeps 15 to 18 hours per day? The fastest sloth ever recorded in history moved 10 feet per minute. Fastest sloth. Some of you have seen the movie Zootopia and the sloth that worked in the police department, and she moved really slow. That's what when you read the word sluggard in Proverbs, think a slow, lazy, irresponsible person. That's a sluggard. And Solomon says, go to the ant. So ants, like I just remember when I was a kid running around like stomping on ants. Now all of a sudden they're our teacher. But he says, go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. Notice he says be wise. That implies that laziness is not wise. Laziness is foolishness. See, work isn't what we have to do to get what we want. Work's what we get to do. Work is good. It's very good. God said in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 11, Solomon tells us this: those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. People who chase fantasies have no sense. I don't work, I just play the lottery. I don't work, I'm just involved in this get-rich-quick scheme. People who don't work but chase fantasies have no sense. That's foolishness. The get-rich-quick people, the dreamers, the lazy people that don't work, people who chase, that means to pursue frantically. If you chase fantasies in the Hebrew, that means things that are empty or worthless. You have no sense. Work is the wise step to make. Laziness is foolishness. Verse 7 says, it, being the ant, has no commander, nor overseer, or ruler. Jot this down. Laziness needs constant supervision. I mean, think back to when you were a kid and the ants were working on your driveway. You notice it just didn't seem like they ever had a boss telling them what to do. They had a mission. Each ant had a job, and they did it. They're self-motivated. They're self-disciplined. Ants operate with a high amount of initiative. Okay? It's not like Andy the ant had his construction hat on going, come on, Carla, get going here. Right? They're all in a line. They're working diligently. Lazy people, on the other hand, need constant outside motivation. They need constant outside correction. They need constant outside direction. Lazy people always need supervision. So before the Lord blessed me enough to go full-time in the ministry here, I actually did landscaping. And we had some accounts where we would mow the grass at different apartment complexes and stuff. We had some big apartment complexes, big condo places. And I had this guy that worked for me. And man, I'm just telling you, every time I gave him a task to do, hey, go weed eat the pool area, I would go and be doing my thing. You'd look up and he'd be like sitting in the truck smoking a cigarette. It's like, dude, really? Come on. It's like 90 degrees out here. Let's get it done and get home. All right, man, all right. And then he'd get out of the truck, and then you'd find him wandering over in the shade. And it's like, where's the weed eater? Well, I had to come over here and check on this. Check on what? Well, I mean, I had to use the bathroom. He knew I couldn't be like, no, you didn't. But my point is, constantly having to be on him. Like, what are you doing? Get the task done. This is the job. Proverbs 10:26 tells us, Solomon tells us, as vinegar to the teeth. So listen, every morning when I get up, I take a shot of apple cider vinegar and water with honey. And it's supposed to be good for you. And the reason I put it in water and honey is because vinegar can be very damaging to your teeth. It can eat through the enamel, right? It's very irritating to your teeth. And that's what Solomon's saying here. Just like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so are sluggards to those who sin. So are lazy people to their bosses. They are irritating, aggravating, right? Lazy people are so aggravating to try to manage because they constantly need supervision. Constantly. The question is this: if ants can work with no supervision, why can't we? I mean, now think when you're at work. Do you work as hard when no one's looking? You know, when your boss is out of town, when your manager's at a meeting, when your supervisor's at lunch, do you work just as hard when they're not there looking over you as you do when they are there? Do you work hard when the results won't be known? Like when it's you and 3 other guys and you're doing some kind of team project at work? When the boss won't know exactly how much you did or didn't do you work just as hard as if it were just your project, or do you just kind of lay back? We're talking about laziness at work and it needing constant supervision. See, you reap what you sow. And Proverbs 12:24 tells us that diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. You know what that's saying? Steady, persistent, hard work in the field often leads to promotions. Diligent hands will rule. They'll manage. They'll tend to be supervisors. But lazy people, they tend to have the boss on their back all the time. Get it done. It ends in forced labor, right? Laziness is foolishness. It needs constant supervision. Look in verse 8. Speaking of the ant, it stores up its provisions in the summer and gathers its food at harvest. So jot this down. This is our third characteristic of laziness. Laziness has no thought of the future. It's foolishness. It needs constant supervision. It has no thought of the future. During the harvest, there's plenty. But the sluggard in this case doesn't think about the winter. Right? Proverbs 20, verse 4, he tells us, sluggards don't plow in season. So at harvest, they look and find nothing. So winter season is the plowing season in the Middle East. But what would happen is lazy people would really tend to avoid the trouble of working out in the cold because it's wintertime. Problem is, if you wait till it's warm in the Middle East to plow, it's too late. You should have planted by then. And what Solomon is telling us here is that a lack of work leads to a lack of benefits. And laziness has no thought of the future. The ant stores up what it gets, right? But lazy people never consider their future needs. Lazy people may talk about tomorrow, but they don't ever plan for it. They don't ever prepare for it. As long as they're good today, well, then that's all that matters to lazy people. There's no thought of working hard and earning more and saving for a future time, right? Like newsflash, that car's tires aren't going to last 16 years. You're going to need some new tires. Your bills are going to fluctuate. Your air conditioner's going to go out. Lazy people never think of that. As long as they're good today, then they're good. Laziness is foolishness, needs constant supervision, has no thought of the future. This makes me laugh. Look at verse 9 and 10. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When are you going to get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Just jot this down. Laziness always needs rest. Lazy people are always tired. Seriously, like, I need a break. Like, so Sam, he's conned me for the last 2 years into coaching little girls basketball with him, right? And it seemed like the first practice that we went to last year, the laziest girl came up after layups and was like, Coach, can we have a water break? It was like, for what? I'm tired, Coach. It's like, you just shot 2 layups. Well, Coach, I need a drink of water. Sam's mean and said, no, you can't have any water. And, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. The point is that lazy people always need rest. They're always tired. It's always this attitude of, I need to sit down. I need to rest. I need to sleep. And listen to me, that attitude tends to build on itself, and it can actually turn into a way of life. I mean, think about this. I'd say most of us here know the truth behind this. How many of y'all know that you're more tired after a day of nothing than a day after hard work? Like you just sleep in and then you wake up and you just lay in bed and watch TV and then you get up and then you eat lunch because it's lunchtime. Then you lay back down and watch TV. Man, by 6 o'clock you're like, man, I got to go to bed. This can turn into a lifestyle. Laziness. Always focused on rest. Always focused on sitting down. And listen, let me say this too. Rest is a good thing, okay? God created in 7 days. What did he do on the seventh day? Right. So actually he created in 6 days, rested on the seventh. It's called a Sabbath. A Sabbath, a day of rest. I take a Sabbath every single Monday. I rest. I do no work, no church stuff, no sermon work. I don't even try to work around the house. I just sit and rest. Rest is good, okay? It helps us recover from 6 days of hard work, and it recharges us for 6 more days of hard work. But this lifestyle of, always got to rest, that's laziness. It always needs downtime, laziness does. And listen to me, downtime tends to lead to trouble, right? What's all the moms saying here? Idle hands are, right, the devil's workshop. There's so much truth in that too. Listen to me. No work, nothing to do. Oh, well, what can I? That's not a great place to be, okay? Parents of children, you need to remember that, okay? You need to remember that idle time is the devil's workshop, okay? It's not a great place to be when your kids are just like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do today. I've got 6 hours to do what. Oftentimes it can lead to some mischief. So if you've got children that are working age, 8, 9, 10 years old, I'm just kidding. I thought y'all weren't going to catch that. If you've got some teenage children, put them to work. Put them to work. They need to learn a strong work ethic. They need to learn the value of work. They need to be willing to work. Work is part of our responsibility given to us by God. Laziness always needs rest. Here's the 5th characteristic of laziness. It actually comes from Proverbs 22:13, and it cracks me up because Solomon's pretty funny in this too. Y'all should read the Bible like it was written really by a man. But Solomon writes in Proverbs 22:13, the sluggard says, there's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the public square. Jot this down. Laziness always has an excuse. Listen, y'all. 3,000 years ago, there really wouldn't be any lions roaming in the middle of a town in Israel, okay? But a lazy person can always find an excuse to get out of work, right? No matter how extreme it is, no matter how ridiculous it is, just like Solomon said, the lazy person's like, I can't work. I might go outside and there may be a lion roaming the streets. It's like, okay, so even if there is, do you think it's going to pick you to get? Probably because you're the laziest. But that was an extreme excuse, right? And it's the same today. Lazy people will make all kind of excuses why they can't work. I found some this week when I was looking on the internet. And actually a guy called in to work because his wife found out he was cheating on her and she threw all of his stuff out in the yard. So he's like, I don't have anything to wear. All my clothes are in the yard. Another guy called in work and his excuse was, I couldn't come to work today, or I can't come to work today because my convertible is filled with flour. And the manager was like, he was like, well, I was at this coffee shop. It's next door to a bakery, and a truck pulls up in front of my car, and I just happened to have the top down on my car, and something happened with the truck, and all of a sudden it dumped out all this flour in my car. Sound pretty sketch to me. The point is, lazy people will make excuses to not work. It's too cold. It's too dangerous. I'm sick. I'm overwhelmed. I'm sad. I'm tired. Listen to me. The person who will not work quickly becomes the person who cannot work. Always have excuses. Always have excuses. I also saw this week where a guy called in and said his fridge fell on him. A woman called in and was like, I can't work today because I poked myself in the eye with my hairbrush. I mean, excuses. Laziness always has excuses. Let me give you these 5 one more time before we move on. Laziness is foolishness, needs constant supervision, has no thought of the future, always needs rest, always has an excuse. 5 characteristics of laziness. Now let's look at 4 consequences of laziness. Stay right there in Proverbs 6. Look at verse 11. Go to the ant, consider its ways. How long will you lie there? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. Verse 11, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Jot this down. Laziness leads to poverty. I mean, obviously, this is pretty self-explanatory, but laziness is linked to poverty because the way we get money is by working, right? It takes money to live. You may say, well, Kev, God's my provider. Okay, well, listen, God is a God of means. He uses things to accomplish an end. And the means that God uses to provide for us is work. Okay? Proverbs 19:15 tells us, or Solomon rather tells us in Proverbs 19:15, laziness brings on deep sleep and the shiftless go hungry. People are like, I don't work, I don't have any shifts. Okay, you go hungry. It leads to poverty, right? Some people, on the other hand, just talk about work. They just talk a whole lot about work. They don't do any work, they talk about it. Solomon had something for these people too in Proverbs 14, verse 23. He says, all hard work brings profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. You don't make any work by just you don't make any money by just talking about work. Okay? Hard work pays off, talking about work doesn't. Talkers and doers, 2 different people here. And Solomon says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Poverty will come on you like a thief. Scarcity like an armed man. The idea here is like suddenly poverty will come on you. If you don't work, pretty quickly you're going to realize that you're impoverished. Laziness leads to poverty. Now flip over to Proverbs 26 and we'll get our other 3 consequences of laziness. Oh, sorry, this one makes me laugh too. Proverbs 26:14, read it. As a door turns on its hinges, so a sluggard turns on his bed. Right? Just like the hinges of a door are anchored to the door jamb, a sluggard's anchored to the bed. Right? And there's a lot of side to side, there's a lot of flipping around, but there's no real movement. Right? Just jot this down. Laziness leads to emptiness. Just like the hinges on a door do a lot of turning, but they go nowhere, it's the same with a lazy person's life. It's headed nowhere. There's no progression, there's no growth. And listen to me. When you find yourself in a place where there's no progression in your life, you're not working, you're not accomplishing anything, that tends to lead to like feelings of unfulfillment and this missing satisfaction in your life. Proverbs 13:4 tells us that. It says, a sluggard's appetite's never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. Now, as you read that, you may be thinking appetite, desires, like for food. But what if he doesn't mean food there? What if he's saying what the lazy person's goals are in life or desires for their life is never filled because they won't work? But somebody who works hard finds purpose and satisfaction in their life. See, you've got to understand that hard work produces something that's good and fulfilling to our soul. And it's like that because we were created by God to work, and work's good. And when you don't work, you're missing out on something that's good and something that's soul satisfying. And then what happens is this lifestyle of laziness can actually lead to apathy and depression. Where am I going? I'm not going anywhere in life. I don't have any thing that I'm accomplishing. And it can lead to this I don't care attitude, and it can actually lead to depression. And then you look up and there's wasted days and wasted weeks and wasted years, and then sadly a wasted life. But you want to see people who are fired up about life? Hard workers. Hard work. I'm telling you, there's something about spending yourself and getting something done that produces energy and passion in your life. And laziness produces the opposite. I mean, really, if you were to talk to some people have like retired early, or other people may have wealth and they don't work and their lives are miserable. Listen, it's a good thing to work. It's a good thing to work and then come home at the end of the day and sit down and say to yourself, man, I'm tired. Man, I worked hard today. That's a good thing. And you know, whether you work with your hands or your mind or both, it doesn't matter. To come home and sit down super tired and think, I worked hard today, that's good. That's good. It's called work ethic. And it's really something to be proud of. Work isn't awful, y'all. It's a privilege. We're designed to work. Laziness leads to poverty and emptiness. And then stay right there in chapter 26 and look at the next verse, verse 15. Again, funny to me. A sluggard buries his hand in the dish. He's too lazy to bring it back to his mouth. I mean, think about this. Like, hey, you want a chip? And yeah, give me the bowl. Sit it right here on my leg. And it's like, oh, I want a chip. And it's like, oh, man. The work to have to bring this potato chip out of the bowl and I'm just going to leave my hand in the bowl. All right? I mean, that's pretty lazy if you ask me, right? But here's the point here. He buries his hand in the dish. He just won't bring it out. Jot this down. Laziness leads to unfinished tasks. Lazy people tend to be able to start a project but not finish it. At least struggle to finish a task. Right? Proverbs 12:27 is kind of funny to me too, because Solomon says, the lazy don't roast any game, but the diligent feed on the riches of the hunt. The idea is this: lazy people will go out and kill an animal and bring it back, but they're too lazy to skin it and clean it and cook it, and then it rots. So they'll do part of the job. Just too lazy to complete the process, right? So I don't know what this looks like at your house, but if you've started a project around your house and not finished it, if you've started your education and not finished it, if you've started an apprenticeship and not finished it, if you've started a load of laundry and not finished it, it can manifest itself in 1,000 different ways. But laziness leads to unfinished tasks. Then lastly here, the fourth consequence of laziness in verse 16, a sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 people who answer discreetly. A lazy person is smarter in their own eyes than 7 people who answer very wisely or with discretion and discernment. Just jot this down. Laziness leads to denial. Lazy people don't think they're lazy. It's almost like an alcoholic who refuses